Yo, what's shaking, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the Overreaction Monday show. I'm Geoff Ketchum. That is Anwar Richardson. This episode of the Orangebloods Texas Football Channel brought to you by RogueShop.com. We're going to be talking Jordan Addison. We're going to be talking about overreactions from the weekend. But before we get started, Anwar, show them the goods. Go get the hookup at RogueShop.com. So you can enjoy the weekends like Anwar and I enjoy the weekends, and maybe sometimes even your Monday morning. As everybody joins into the live show, welcome to everybody in the comments section. Be sure to leave your comments in the comments. We will take some questions. We'll look at the funny comments. We'll do all of that stuff. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, do all of those things. Mr. Richardson feels like we would be burying the lead if we did anything other than talk a little bit about Pittsburgh wide receiver Jordan Addison today. The latest at this point is that there's not really a latest. Longhorn still pursuing. He's still giving indications that he's listening, and he certainly hasn't told anybody on the Texas side of things that the Longhorns are out. My sources this weekend telling me that I think the Longhorns would like to have an answer at some point this week. The earlier, the better. Your thoughts on Addison talk in general, and then I might go off in my my Monday overreaction comments.
Wow. Okay. Well, I want to hear what you have to say more than I want to say what I want to say. So I'm going to be quick and to the point as far as Addison is concerned. To your point, Cash, you haven't said no. So because, he's still on the board, like we don't know what the whole situation is. It's just a slow play to eventually to go to USC. Is this kind of like bargaining and see if he can get a little bit more, maybe have, NIL people, on both sides bidding against each other for his services. Either way, he's not in a hurry. I wonder how much of a deadline Texas really has when if you get a chance to add the nation's best receiver, you got to wait. I mean, you got some time. Like, I think workouts start on, was it May 31st or something to that effect, if I'm correct? So summer workouts. So you've got a little bit of time. But hell, if you got a chance to add somebody that good, you obviously do it. So I've said all I needed to say on it because I wanted to hear what the hell your overreaction is.
Well, I just think Texas fans are weirdly missing the boat on NIL, on the changes to the sport of college football. And you have to be careful to lump everybody into the same group. But you and I were having a conversation before we even started this broadcast about the comments that Pittsburgh's head coach made about Braylon Addison. There I go. I did it. I've been wanting to call that kid Braylon Addison for like a week now, and it finally snuck in. You can't take your starting quarterback from USC out of the portal and then be upset when one of your kids wants to try the portal. I mean, we're in this world where everybody is using the portal for whatever strengths that they need or weaknesses that they need to improve. It's part of the college game. And I don't understand Texas fans not yet appreciating that the portal and NIL are making Texas better. That the Longhorns as a program have been stuck in purgatory. At best, they've been in purgatory for the last 12 years. At worst, it's like actually hell. 5-7, 6-game losing streak, kind of hellish. I'm just saying. And they're making improvements in this offseason directly through the portal and through the aid of NIL dollars. And so I know maybe it's because they haven't had a chance yet to see Quinn Ewers play, or maybe because they haven't had a chance to see Isaiah Nayor play, or they haven't had a chance to see what a Jordan Addison would do in a Texas offense if a guy like Jordan Addison transferred to the Longhorns. But this program needs something to shake it up. It needs something different to happen than what we've seen over the course of the last 12 years. And as far as I can tell, the portal for the University of Texas has done nothing but mostly get rid of dead weight while adding players that I think make the program better. I'm so much more in favor of the portal right now than high school football recruiting and the empty promises that come with 4-star rankings and the constant how many 4 and 5 stars does it take to beat a TCU or a Baylor or whatever, because almost nobody understands what it means, what the value of an actual 4-star is. I think the portal and NIL has a chance to be the thing that brings Texas out of the dumps faster than anything else. And for a lot of Texas fans that I've seen lately, Anwar, to act as if players making money wasn't something that already existed, for a lot of fans to talk about this romantic idea of amateurism as if it's actually been a real thing for the last few decades is so naive that it makes me wonder why the need to be naive exists. On one hand, you laugh about Eric Dickerson taking a couple of Trans Ams when he was a recruit in the late 70s. And on the other hand, you get upset because a player is profiting off of his name, image, and likeness, and it's at a rate of money that you've deemed somehow, unacceptable. I think Texas fans need to embrace the dark side. My overreaction is that Texas fans need to get with the program and realize the pathway for Texas to get out of this 12-year cycle of crap is to add as much talent as possible to the program so that it carries the program out. Nate's takes may have it right. Maybe it is just old heads that are complaining about NIL. But as in general, I just think that the portal and NIL have been a huge aid to what Texas is doing right now. And it fascinates me how not being on board or not even having your eyes open to what's happening with it and how it's helping the university just isn't taking place on a wide scale.
It's interesting, Coach, because I don't understand, I get what people say about as far as them knocking it. But at the end of the day, to your point, guys have always been getting paid. This is nothing new. Guys are getting paid legitimately, and that's the only thing that's new. And I get where maybe there's a little turnoff where guys are transferring to get paid, and so maybe that's where a little bit of the turnoff goes a concern. But nobody gets upset when scholarships aren't renewed. Catch. No one gets upset when a guy sits on the bench and doesn't get any playing time. So at the end of the day, if a guy finds a way to benefit himself and benefit his family, in none of this, he has to wait until the NFL for it to happen. So be it. Like, the complaints, like, what are those guys going to do with all that money? Are they equipped to handle all that money at that age? It's like, that's none of our concern. What about the taxes? Who's going to help them do their taxes? And like, again, it's none of our concern. Like, at the end of the day, that's not the reason why you don't pay them what they're worth, right? And what are they worth? You're worth what someone's willing to pay you. That's exactly what your worth is. And so, Catch, we're going to hit a point where, it will be like free agency. I hope at some point, if there's anything that could be done when people start talking about cut back and all, I don't like any of that. But what I would like to see at some point, Catch, is kind of a period where, let's say after December, somewhere after around bowl games or whatever, where you have a period of transfers. We could say, okay, from December to this whatever date, May, that's your transfer period. Then after that, you get to shut it down. So at least there's little constraints, and I think that would, it's kind of like the NFL where you have free agency that occurs, right? Catch, where it's like, all right, free agency starts at this time. Used to start at midnight. Remember that, Catch? And then all of a sudden there would be deals that were done at like 12:01. It's like, how did that get done in 1 minute? Like, how did you work out a 5-year deal worth $60 million in 1 minute? But it ended up being like they moved it to the afternoon. Would love to see that. And here's the other thing, Catch, I think that becomes, a benefit of the portal especially as relates to Texas football. Catch, I think this year, because of the portal, I think programs will get to see how good their coaches are in a much quicker time span than the whole, man, you got to wait. He's got to recruit his guys. It's got to take him about 3 or 4 years to develop. You need some time. Catch, you bring in a bunch of guys in year 2, you get to see right away. We get to see what Steve Sarkisian gets to do with bringing in Jaleel Billingsley, Ryan Watts, Quinn Ewers, that's is more likely starting quarterback, Ajay Hall, Isaiah Nayer, like all that gets to happen like right now. You get to judge like pretty quickly. So I think it speeds up a lot of things. I think that I see nothing but benefits. And at the end of the day, if someone needs to go somewhere and they need to be happy, so be it. Why should you or any one of us stand in their way?
Well, I think when we look at the Jordan Addison recruitment that's taking place right now, the Longhorns are legitimately one of only a couple of schools really involved in the active chase of Addison. Now, whether they get him or not, the fact that they're in the mix and only a couple of schools right now could even possibly in the mix speaks to this advantage that I think Texas has. And there's no other world where if the program had an advantage, I mean, think of the Longhorn Network. The fans, the concept of the Longhorn Network pretty much ended the Big 12 as we used to know it. But Texas fans were all for it. Why? Because they thought it had a chance to be a monumental advantage for the program, specifically in recruiting. That the idea to have your entire career covered by a network, that the access of mom and pop living in a state 5 states away, still being able to keep up with their son or daughter in their respective sports. The thought was that was going to be a huge advantage. Now, it didn't work out that way, but it went down in the first place because the idea was it would be a huge advantage. What we're seeing right now in NIL, and I can't stress it enough, Texas is in this opportunity to even be in the mix with Addison because from an NIL standpoint, they've established, I think, I mean, you don't want to throw hyperbole out there, but NIL is helping them close the deal with a number of transfers so far this season. And I think that if you're Texas, you need to embrace who you are and what edge you have. And right now, there aren't enough Jordan Addisons in the portal. If you were Texas, what you really need is a defensive end in the portal, another one. You need some linebackers. You could use a safety. You could probably use a kicker, and I think that the rules as they've been formed play into Texas's hands. Texas, for me, and I don't mean this to be critical of the NIL, the people in charge of NIL, or even I don't know that Texas fully understands what it has on its hands right now. I think they should have been even more aggressive. I think they should live even more in the gray. I think they should be doing whatever they can to steer kids from other schools into the portal so they can give them NIL deals and make your team better. It's the idea of recruiting, but on steroids. And at this point, there aren't rules to break. So, and I see one of the comments in the comment section, y'all forgot about Will Stone catch. They have a kicker. They have a freshman kicker that's never kicked in front of people before. So, they do have Will Stone, Jay. That's kind of my point. If the bodies were there, Sarkisian would take them. If there was a way for him to get all of these needs that they have, he would. And then in the fall, when this team is better and no longer going 5-7, I think a new appreciation for what the portal might and has provided for the Longhorns, I think will come in greater appreciation. I just can't stress enough, Anwar. They're in the mix for Addison. They have no rightful place to be in the mix. They went 5-7 last year. They have a quarterback that's never played really in a college game before. They got a head coach that hasn't proven he can be a winner in college football at a high level yet. Like, they've got all these things that seemingly would be working against them, and yet they're right there. They're having conversations. Addison is listening. Why? Because Texas has been able to arm itself in the world of NIL to a level that when a Jordan Addison goes into the portal, Texas has his attention. And in a sport that really is by any means necessary for the most part, this falls into that category as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I mean, Catch, I think what Texas has to do is really approach this thing and say, okay, we're going to be the New York Yankees of college football. Just, embrace it and say, you know what? We've got the money to spend. We've got the people who are willing to do it. And you do what you're supposed to do. The Yankees for years, Catch, they never apologized to the Tampa Bay Rays for spending more money for guys. Like, in fact, they were like, thank you. Years ago, it's like, I remember when I was in Tampa and Carl Crawford was a standout there. And everything was for how many years was, how long can they keep Carl Crawford there? And then eventually they're like, yeah, all right, well, he's going to go to Boston, right? And you knew it, you understood it. And Boston never apologized for being Boston. The Yankees never apologized for being the Yankees. And there's no reason for Texas to say, you know what, at the end of the day, this is our advantage. Because if Catch, when all things were equal, Catch, Quinn Ewers didn't come here. When all things were equal, Quinn Ewers went to Ohio State. And guess what? When it was time for the recruitment process to reopen again, and he was choosing between Texas and of course, Texas Tech, you know what played a huge role in that, Catch? It was NIL. Yes, does he love the Longhorns? Absolutely. Does he have a Longhorn tattoo on his leg now? Absolutely. Yes, Texas had to give him a reason to come home, to be a Longhorn again. And so if you're Texas, Catch, don't shy away from it. Don't run away from it. One of the things that I was doing, I was on a podcast a couple of weeks ago with Andy Staples. And he told me, he said he thought one of the biggest challenges and issues that Texas has had is that Texas just hasn't embraced its identity. It's always trying to be like other programs, right? It's always trying to emulate what other programs, oh, they did this at Bama. Oh, they do this at Ohio State. And Texas is trying to be like them. He said, when he pointed out Pete Carroll, he goes, when Pete Carroll was at USC, he embraced what USC was. It was Hollywood. It's LA, right? Stars are out. Like they embraced it, and then they excelled in it. They understood this is what USC is all about. And Texas has been afraid to be Texas. Texas is afraid to, for years. We don't want to go to the SEC. Man, whew. We're an academic institution, and we're okay over here. And it's like, dude, you are the richest program in all of college football. Who cares? If someone doesn't like it, if Tech doesn't like it, Baylor doesn't like it, whoever doesn't like it, it don't matter. It don't matter. Cry me a river. Go ahead and buy them a golden Kleenex if you need to. Gold box Kleenex tissues. Tell them to cry themselves to sleep. Give them some Rogue products. Use the discount code and send it to them. At this point, Texas just got Catch. They just next year. I think now we're seeing them being more aggressive than we've seen them before. And I think the rest of this year, they should even go even more over the top. Whoever's coming in the transfer portal, I want you to think about Texas first because they've got the money, they got the resources. Don't be afraid to be who you are.
One of the reasons why I think having a general manager, right? I say that, call it whatever you want to. It's kind of the accepted term for, I think, someone who would be in this position. This time, the difference between what I think you'd hope this year would be versus next year is that Texas knows what its weaknesses are. I don't think they've done nearly enough to influence who enters the portal. Jordan Addison is partly in the portal because USC and Texas, to a certain extent, were having some NIL conversations with his people. And he knew, you know what? It's there to be made. if you're Texas, and I've stressed this for months, certainly going back into last year, find the gray area and live in it like Alabama does, like Georgia does, like Clemson does, like Ohio State does. You've got to find yourself in a position where guys that fix your needs actually enter the portal. I wrote in my column, my 10 thoughts from the weekend, which you can access over on orangebloods.com today. Go check out the website, both Anwar and I, with columns in the last 24 hours. Mother's Day doesn't keep us from doing our jobs. Nope. If a Tyler Smith is at Tulsa and he doesn't enter the NFL draft, but he's clearly a guy that's on his way to being there, get your people in contact with his people and let him know that should he not want to be at Tulsa next year, there's a lot of NIL money for him to make if he enters the portal. I think the next step is a school like Texas identifying the players that can make their team better, and through the portal and through some arm twisting and massaging of feelings and things like that, you help these guys enter the portal. We're still at this age where guys are feeling out what the portal is. And I think more and more you're going to see good players entering the portal to see what's out there for them. It makes total sense. It makes more sense for a kid to put his feet into the portal and to test the waters than it doesn't at this point. And the last thing that I think Texas needs to do to really be a bear in this market is to help influence who's entering the portal, and don't wait. Don't sit around asking yourself, how desperate do we need to be for O'Shawn Mathis because he fits a need, so that he's the only guy that can fit the need? I think you've got to be more aggressive than that. The thing that Texas has going for it is that it's in the state of Texas. Literally, there are thousands of college football players from the state of Texas scattered all over the country. Texas needs a general manager in place to find those players, to initiate conversations with people close to those players, so that when it's time, if there's a space for them, they know, if I enter the portal, that might lead to $250,000 of NIL money, a bigger platform, all of these things. But it doesn't just happen on accident. Where Texas now has to take the next step is they've got to stop waiting for things to fall into their lap. I think they need to start shaking some trees. Probably doesn't happen this year, but starting next year, yeah. Like, if you're not, I don't think you're fully utilizing the weaponry that you have at your disposal.
Yeah, and Catch, I think one of the things I think you pointed out in your column, and it kind of coincided what I had in the war room on Thursday, and I'm telling you, if you're not on Orangebloods, I mean, I would tell you this week you've missed out on a lot of just good insight. But one of the things, Catch, is kind of you've alluded to, when you start talking about high school recruiting rankings, right? And we start talking about the misses that occur through high school recruiting rankings, the one thing the transfer portal gives a coach an opportunity to do is to make up for those misses and really eliminate the amount of misses that you're going to have in a given recruiting class, Catch, because you're talking about being able to get proven products that this person has established themselves. You're projecting when it comes to all the other guys that you're talking about, the kid from Texas, the kid from Florida, the kid from California, the kid from Alabama. You're hoping that kid evolves into something good or something special, as opposed to the things that we're talking about right now. Do you take a Jaleel Billingsley where you already know what his body of work is, or do you take the kid from high school that you hope is going to kind of maybe develop into some point? Do you take an Isaiah Nair, who okay, this is who he is, and so this is who he can be because he's already shown us this at Wyoming? Or you take a little risk on the guy, from whatever small school, because you're like, I think he can be something special down the line. There's the question of, do you take a Quinn Ewers, who who maybe still has some question marks, but he's got a high upside. He's a 5-star. Or do you go for like the 3-star guy? So maybe Quinn would be the best example. Maybe Ryan Watts would be a better example. But you get what I'm trying to say. These guys are proven. And so this is where I think the transfer portal works to the advantage. And one of the coaches that I spoke to this past week said that's one of the reasons why going forward, he said, I much rather have a team full of portal guys for a couple of reasons. One, they're established. Two, they've already transferred. So the one-time transfer rule is already in effect. And now I don't have to worry that, oh my goodness, this guy's going to be gone in 2 years, 3 years. So all of a sudden you get a guy who's already done the one-time transfer. And let's say he's done it as a freshman. You know you've got him for the next 3 years, and then you can grow and develop your program there. There will be coaches that need to adjust. And they will the coaches that adjust their thinking faster will achieve success faster. The coaches that still hold on to the old mentality of the way how it used to be and bitch and complain and all these other type of things, those are the coaches who are going to get left behind in the short term. So there are lots of benefits. And I think from a recruiting advantage, it definitely helps.
Yeah, I think there are two types of prospects from the portal that Texas has been identifying in the offseason. The first one is proven college players who've proven in college that they can ball, and you're projecting that proven ability onto your roster, right? So Isaiah Nayor is a perfect example of that. Jaleel Billingsley, though, I would put in there as well. Like, even if he's never quite broken out as a star for Alabama, that guy's played in a lot of big games. Mm-hmm. I mean, he's played and he's had success. And so I think there's a category of guys that fits that category. And then I think one of the things that Texas has very wisely done, so one of the things I think Sarkisian's done a really good job of is, and Ryan Watts is probably a tweener in between these two categories, but it's proven college guys, and then it's elite level prospects who, for whatever reason, are transferring from the school that they're currently at. Yeah. Quinn Ewers falls into that category. Ryan Watts, he could have stayed at Ohio State and probably been a starter this year, but he wasn't quite there, but was a big-time he falls into that category. You look at Agiye Hall, again, a big-time national top 100 type prospect. It's not happening at Alabama. He's unproven, but the talent is dripping off the page with him. These players make sense. I think that if you're Texas, those are your two sweet spots. It's proven players, and it's elite level talent, not 4-star talent, not your run-of-the-mill 4-star, not your 3 stars. Your truly legitimate potential impact talents that, for whatever reason, just haven't quite found what they're looking for at their first stop. They're the perfect target. And I think that that's your recipe if you're at Texas. I personally think Texas needs to lean even more into the proven player market, because if they're forceful and they're taking full advantage of what they have at their disposal, I think you're talking about, especially when you're a team that's on the rise or trying to be on the rise, it's the quickest way to get better immediately. We saw Michigan State do it a year ago. We saw Baylor really take advantage of this a year ago as well, even if they did so pretty quietly. I think that it's just a matter of Texas fully embracing, like you said, who they are and what they can be. If anybody should be upset about this, Anwar, it should be Ohio State. It should be Alabama. It should be Georgia. It should be those who've been winning with the way the rules have been. And now the only thing that really threatens them are the rule changes that potentially open the door for others to come inside. Yes. As it's currently been, Texas hasn't been involved in anything relevant nationally in such a long time. If I'm a Texas fan, I'm with both arms and legs embracing a change that potentially shakes things up in a way where the Cool Kids Club includes more than just a couple of schools. And real quickly to that point, USC falls into this category. They haven't really been relevant nationally in over a decade. That Addison is in the portal and isn't looking at the traditional schools that have been playing in the playoffs for the last 4 or 5 years, even longer than that, speaks to, I think, how this is an opportunity for those who are halves but haven't truly been halves in a while to be halves again. And, if you're Texas, that's where you want to be.
Catch, okay, how about this? Maybe you can expand on this from a recruiting standpoint. A&M. You talk about the quote-unquote have-nots. A&M finishes with a #1 recruiting class, and a lot of that is clearly because of NIL, and maybe that was some of the wake-up call that Texas needed. But speak to that. I mean, that doesn't normally happen, right? But now in the age of NIL, all of a sudden, if you're Bama in Georgia, you wake up and you're like, what the hell just happened here?
Well, Texas A&M, the perception has been that they've been leaning into a different kind of pay for play kind of. It's not quite NIL the way Texas is doing NIL, because it's money for high school kids before they're in college. Mm-hmm. And you haven't seen A&M active in the portal. They haven't really been pulling transfers. They haven't really been landing the likes of a Quinn Ewers or an Isaiah Nayor, but their program is loaded. And look, there are a lot of people that would tell you that the ways that they've been building their program fall outside of the category of the way college football 50, 60 years ago was intended to be made. By any means necessary. There's nobody that's going to stop Texas A&M, period. The NCAA is not going to do anything. So if you're Texas or you're some of these other schools, you've got to do what you got to do. You've got to figure out what your pathway is. The one for Texas is so apparent that I'm trying to convey to Texas fans who are pushing against it. Go with the flow here. The current is with you. And you better pick a stream, because if you just sit on the side and keep romanticizing about, well, I liked it better when players weren't getting paid and it was all about the love of the school. And what world do you live in? Do you really think that's what Alabama's doing? They just got a bunch of guys that are in it for the love. That Ohio State is, all those kids at Ohio State are just in it because on Saturdays they love to see the I get dotted with the band. That's the thing. No, man, these guys are about trying to maximize their ability and their money-making potential, and they have been forever. The SEC didn't become the dominant conference in America because the kids that go to that conference didn't like money, didn't like best pathway to the NFL. They just think that the helmets are cooler and the education is better and the fans are nicer. I mean, it's just weird that to be so naive on purpose, to launch yourself down the rabbit hole of the sanctity and purity of college athletics, as if there has been purity and sanctity in college athletics since any of us have been alive.
Never. I mean, we're what year was Pony Express, Catch?
That was like early 80s, late 70s. Darrell Royal got out of college football coaching because he perceived the way that Oklahoma and others were recruiting in the mid-70s was just something he couldn't do. The purity was out of the sport before I was born. And look, Texas Savage, #3 Sports, has a perfect post on this. Urban Meyer to Texas. What about that in the name of all things holy? What about that was pure? What about that was, you know what? I like the good old days where the sport was pure. Texas tried to hire Urban Meyer, who's a horrible human being, but they knew that it would mean victories. They knew that it would translate to winning.
If Urban said yes, he would be here right now. And I don't want to make too many finger up the booty jokes, but it would be happening. I mean, and Texas fans would be excusing it because his wife would have tweeted out something and he's just out there having fun, and we're like, leave them alone. That's what goes on behind closed doors. That's what they do. You're right, though, Ketch. I mean, that literally almost happened where, I mean, we know people that Urban have that was arrested at Florida. I mean, he's definitely not the reason for Aaron Hernandez, but he was on his team in Florida where there was some things that may or may not have happened under his watch, and yet Texas is doing that. Hell, Catch, in my column, I set the over/under of 3.5 years. How long before there's a program out there willing to convince themselves that Urban is a changed man? And I set the line at 3.5.
12 months.
So you take the under, right?
Yeah, oh, yeah.
You'll take that because he's going to be on TV in the fall. He's going to say cool stuff. And there's going to be a program that tells themselves, he's been through a lot, but he's a changed person. How many years have people tried to hire Art Briles? Hell, to this day, they still try to hire Art Briles. So they're like, well, I mean, all right. I mean, that's nothing. So you're right. When it comes to the whole sanctity, that thing, everyone's got to get off the high horse. This is what it is. This is what, college football is. And the sanctity thing was gone years ago where guys were helping programs earn a lot of money and never receiving a dime off of it. The Reggie Bushes of the world. How much then technically Reggie did make some money, so we gotta let that go. But if there was some NIL legit stuff, then USC wouldn't have those, some of those issues that they have. It is what it is. Texas has to embrace it. There's no need to be shy about it. This is the new thing. Catches it. You know what it's like? I give you another good example. It's like what's above our heads. Rogue Shop, right? And you remember when the CBD and being able to buy that stuff kind of became legal, being able to buy CBD is different than obviously cannabis, but all of a sudden stuff people say, ooh, man, I don't know. Can you go and buy like legalized stuff? Man, I don't know about that. And now you're at the point, it's like, dude, it's right here. I mean, it's let it go. But beforehand, it wasn't like, whoa, people aren't smoking and doing their own thing. Like beforehand, everyone was going to meet somebody and the guy would pop in your back seat. I'm not saying I know. I may have heard or saw a movie about it, but guy pops in your back seat, gives it to you. And now all of a sudden you just walk into a shop and you've got coupons and discount codes and all this other type of stuff. You just got to embrace where we're at this moment.
It's strange to me, weirdly, how I feel. And look, it's hard to group people together fairly. I mean, it might be that I'm talking about a very small vocal minority here. But there is this perception, I think, that the old days of giving kids suitcases full of money, like under the table, that's okay. Right? Like, that never stopped people from loving the sport. Right? And the sports, but that's been going on for 50 years. And I've never heard someone say, all these kids in the South getting suitcases full of money and Trans Ams and whatever, it's going to make me stop watching the sport. But the moment the kid gets an above the table deal for roughly the same amount of money, it's, the sanctity. I'm just having a hard, because either you're okay with you're either okay with the fact that guys have been getting money under the table, or you're completely naive to it all. And I choose to really believe that the reality is they've just been okay with it all. I don't know what it is that can make someone so on tilt and unnerved by these young men getting hookups that they've always been getting, but now this is just a little different.
Green Valley 6, we appreciate your dedication. But you could go back and watch this later, unless you need
this live, but it can be watched later.
If you do need to go back inside feel free. You can watch this later. just, I mean, I don't know. Like, man, rest in peace to whoever that's there. And hey, maybe you need a little break. And so if you needed a mental break, I'm glad we can provide it for you.
To be fair, I've been to funerals before where I wish I had a live show I could watch while waiting.
Yeah, that's true. I went to one not
He didn't say it was like a close family member's death. He just said he's at a funeral.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. That's a point. And people do step out at funerals and stuff too. So sometimes it's it gets heavy in those things. So you need to take a step out. You're right.
And if it was someone close and we're helping you get through this moment with a little mindless Texas football conversation, damn Skippy, that's what we're here for. Rogueshop.com, they'll help you too.
Yes. So you're right. It is. I got to tell you, this is what happens when we go live. And this is why I think why we love it so much. Because one day it'll be like, hey, so O'Shawn Mathis, and the mom pop saying, like, what just happened? And now literally one of the first is someone stepped out of a funeral or to listen to us. But you're right, Ketch. Back to the topic, that whole sanctity thing is such a fraud in thinking for so many reasons, because there's always been things going on, Ketch. There's always been guys getting paid under the table. We'd hear stories about, list this thing on Craigslist and the guy shows up, with the brown paper bag of money. Here you go. Guys have been getting paid, for the longest of long time. But I think Texas has to say, oh, man, this thing, it's legal. This is what the way of the world is. And again, I don't no one was complaining when the NCAA, for March Madness was raking in billions, and the players who actually played in it didn't get anything, because those guys should do it for the love of the game and the education, and then everybody else should just make the money off of them. Like, no, like NCAA is saying, hey man, you guys can go make your money now, no problem. Leave us alone. Take your money. Go out, go and live your life. Be merry. And that's exactly what's happening. And like you said, it's just got to be a reshaping of the thinking. And Catch, maybe 2 or 3 years from now, because clearly we're heading to the point where while recruiting is big, NIL is going to be, big. High school recruiting is big. NIL is going to be bigger, if not better. We're probably going to see staffs at some point, and I mean like websites having specific NIL reporter, and that's just what they do. And you're going to see a lot more NIL rankings going forward. It will just, that's what I think, Orangebloods, Rivals is in the process of that. I think other websites are starting to do that as well. Like, that's going to be the thing. So 3 years from now, I think people are going to be looking around, Catch. I think 3 years from now, they're going to say, man, that guy over there, I wonder if he would be a guy that wants to come over here to Texas or whatever, Oklahoma, A&M, whatever the program does. That's why I said yes. I know other websites do it. I think On3 does do it. So you're going to see that the future, and I think, like you said, Ken, the quicker that everyone can embrace it and say, all right, this is it. This is the now. This is what it's going to be. And like I go back to what I said, and if Texas says we're going to be the Yankees, and we'll find a way to outspend everybody, and don't be upset about it and don't clutch your pearls about it, that's fine. Look, Catch, we enjoy watching good games, but at some point we've been talking about how do you shake up college football where it's not the same programs in it every single year. Well, this is one way to do it, and this is a hell of a way to do it. So that Alabama's, we have to see Alabama, Georgia every year. NIL will make it very possible for that to happen.
Back to Jordan Addison for a moment, and we'll put a ribbon and bow on the Monday show here and tell everybody to make sure they tune in tomorrow on Tuesday when we'll have our next edition of the Orangebloods Texas Football Channel. In your mind, is there, on a scale of 1 to 10, where's your head at on how likely Addison to Texas could be? Does it get above a 5?
I hate numbers, God, because they always come back to bite you in the ass. But you asked a question.
I'm not asking you to handicap I'm asking for you, for your headspace. When you've heard this story, when you've read about it, because I'm not so sure there's anybody in this other than USC and Texas. Our Alabama people at Rivals are convinced Alabama's not in the mix. I don't really know who else even could be. We all think the kid's going to end up at USC. There's a lot of suggestions that everything else is just a mirage until,
because he's out in California, right, Coach?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
But that's why I'm asking for you. On a scale of 1 to 10, this story hits at what?
3.
So what would it mean if it's at a 3, and in a week from now the kid committed to Texas? What does that do for you?
One, money talks, BS walks. 2, that means Texas flexed in a way that I think Texas should flex. To me, if that happens, by the way, Ajay Hall does not leave. It's a one-time transfer, so he's already transferred. If he transfers again, I think Ketchum has to sit out a year.
But he hasn't announced. Technically, he's committed.
Okay.
He hasn't signed any. I don't think the school's announced it or anything like that. So he could change if he wanted to.
Technically, I guess so. He could change. Catch, if you get the nation's best receiver, game on at that point. Catch. So what it does for me, it totally reshapes my expectations of what this year would look like. If you're telling me Texas is going to put out a team that has Bijan Robinson in the backfield, followed by Roshan Johnson, 2 guys who we think we're going to get drafted, and Keelan Robinson. If you tell me Xavier Worthy is going to be on one side, Jordan Addison is going to be on another side, Isaiah Nayor is going to be there in the mix as well, with Jatavian Sanders starting at your tight end, and you still have Quinn. Shit, to me, I think it's game over for most of the other teams in the Big 12. If I'm being quite honest with you, who do you defend at that point? You can't double anyone. You're going to get murdered on a single team by somebody. If your offensive line gives you any semblance of protection, it's game over for just about everyone else. So you tell them you get that guy, I'm telling you it's a lot of slow singing and a lot of flower bringing for everybody else in the Big 12.
Now, imagine the world that we live in. You and I doing this show today. What would be Monday, May 9th? Or what is today?
It is the 9th.
Imagine it's May 9th, 2022. And the portal and NIL don't exist. And the 5-7 Texas team from a year ago doesn't have Quinn Ewers. They don't have Isaiah Nayor. They don't have Ajay Hall or Jaleel Billingsley or Ryan Watts. What are we talking about?
Man, the best
7-8 wins, right? And maybe a max.
Maybe
you're talking about Hudson Card has to be the quarterback.
Maybe you get to 8 without all that. Maybe I don't see how. I think you're trying to be, I think you're trying to be bowl eligible. And thank you for getting the Biggie reference, by the way. I think you're trying to get bowl eligible if you don't have these additions. Because here's the point, to your point, Catch, and again, I have to go, but you made this point many years ago. At one point, Texas had a 2,000-yard running back with Deontay Foreman, 2,000 yards, best running back, Dope Walker Award winner. They won 5 games. As good as Bijan Robinson is, you convinced me. That's all it took for me to understand that.
You got anything else today? I feel like I've hit my points home with a hammer to the point that we're in the, kicking a dead horse part of the program.
Nah, I think we're good. We'll have more content this week. So,
you see the Kendrick video? Go check that out.
Okay.
K-Dot's got a new video out. And in the video, his face morphs into a bunch of other faces. It's kind of trippy.
Okay.
But part of it includes OJ, part of it includes Will Smith, part of it includes Jesse. It's an interesting video. Kobe. It's an interesting piece of art form, I would say.
Okay, I will definitely check it out. Yeah, we won't go sideways and start talking about Chappelle getting attacked on stage or anything like that.
It literally just happened. Like it got dropped overnight. I'm just being a little helper and letting you know, and the people in the chat know that if we're into the rap game at all, Kendrick Lamar, new song, got a new album, I guess, coming out. Kind of came out of nowhere. I didn't know it was coming. And then it was like, hey, Kendrick's got a video. Go check it out. It's trippy. It's on YouTube, by the way. So as soon as you're done with the show,
if you don't want to go back into the funeral,
and then it'll fill in a blank for you.
Hey, Catch, if you don't want to go back into a funeral, you could just go to this next video here.
Do us a solid, like the video, subscribe to the channel, get notifications. Thank you, Philip, for letting me know that the album comes out this month on the 13th. For myself and Anwar Richardson, we've got some YouTube surfing that we're going to go do. You guys have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.